So in this video, I will show how we can use Git Bisect to determine when a bug that we have found in a database system was introduced. Right? So this is actually a video that is not very specific to SQLancer, but I still think it's useful to show this. So let's assume that we run SQLancer and that we find a bug in a database system. Right? It might be, for example, like in the SQLite issue here, that we found one or multiple SQL statements that found a bug. And as you can see here, for this bug report, I also reported when I believe that the bug was being introduced by which commit. Now, the question, first of all, why would this be interesting or useful? So for developers, it's of course quite useful because it might help them to more quickly fix the bug. Right? So if, for example, here we look at the commit, then you can basically see that this was an optimization that was changed or reintroduced here. And like if we can tell this information to the developers, they might be directly able to look at this optimization and figure out what's wrong based on the test case. In addition, if we use bisection to determine when a bug was being introduced, it might also help us to cluster bug-inducing test cases. Right? So if they go back to the same commit, then it's likely that there is some overlap between the bug-inducing test cases, right? That it basically triggered the same underlying bug. So first of all, let's now assume that the latest version, basically today's version, is the one mentioned here in the commit. So first here now to demonstrate how we would use bisection, I will check out this version here. So first of all, I want to demonstrate the Git functionality of Bisect. SQLite uses a different repository management system, namely Fossil. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually I will clone I've already cloned the GitHub repository, which mirrors the official SQLite Fossil repository. Right, so the first step now is actually that we need to find this commit. In order to do this, I'm going to grep for this commit here in the log. And as you can see here, we found this in the following git commit. So I'm checking out now this commit. Next, we need to build SQLite of that version. It will probably take a while. So now we've built SQLite of today's version. We can now double check whether we can indeed reproduce the bug. Yeah, so the result here is 0, while we would expect 1 to be the output here. So now we'll use Git Bisect to determine when this bug was likely being introduced. Right, so here we're actually looking for regression bugs. If it's a new feature, then Git Bisect might not be very useful. So Git Bisect typically expects two versions. First, today's version, which we already found out now, and then yesterday's version, which is the version where we can actually determine that a bug was not yet being triggered. How do we identify this version? Well, we can basically try historic versions that predate the version in which we found the bug. And here, for example, one version that might be applicable is 3.31.1, but we could also try, for example, older ones until we basically identified one version where the bug is not being triggered. Yeah, so let's try to find that version or the syntax here. Sorry, the naming convention. So we have here version 3.31.1. Now we first need to validate our hypothesis that here we won't trigger the bug. Okay, so let's go back again to the test case here. And then here you can see that the result is as expected. Right, so we have now one version where the bug was not yet being triggered, and then a later version where the bug was being triggered. So now we can start a bisection. So I type here git bisect start. Then we can first mark the good version, which is the one that we've just tried, right? So git bisect good. And then we also need to determine the bad version, which is the one from before that we had at the beginning. Let's try to see if we can still find it. Yeah, this one here. So here git bisect bad. And then as you can see, Git will basically apply a binary search, checking out versions that you should try. And then you basically need to tell Git whether the bug is still being reproduced. Right? And because it's a binary search, it will take around 8 steps because there are 264 versions between the good and bad version. Right? So now basically Git asks you to try the commit at version 3.32.1. What you do need to do now is basically to use configure again, basically to build SQLite first. Here we have built the version again. Now let's again check whether the bug is still being reproduced. So here the output is 0, which means that it's still the unexpected behavior. So basically need to tell Git that this is a bad commit. Well, as you see, now we again reduce the expected step number by 1. There's still 132 revisions left to test, so about half as compared to before. And now we would basically need to continue doing the same tests until we arrive at the version that indicates, or two versions, one which doesn't trigger the bug and one which introduced the bug. Right? And then basically we would be able to report this information when reporting bugs to the developers. Now, one question is whether this could be made more efficient, because currently we always need to manually conduct these tests. And the answer here is yes. Actually, Git Bisect, you can also pass a script to it and indicate with the return code whether the bug is still being triggered or not. To illustrate this, I already wrote a script here. Here, namely this test.sh script. As you can see in this script, we basically do what I just did manually. We build SQLite, we execute the test case, and then depending on the return value, we either indicate an exit code of 0 or 1. And then basically Git Bisect can automatically determine the bug-inducing version without you having to do any manual work. So what does this look like? Well, we still need to use Git Bisect start. Then we again need to determine the good and the bad version. See the good one, the bad one. And now we can use Git Bisect run, also passing this test script here. And then based on this, Git will automatically determine the bug-inducing test case. Great. As you see now, Git Bisect ran successfully, and it identified the bug-inducing commit. Right? Basically, now it tells you that it found this commit here, which introduced the bug. So with that, thanks for listening.